Since amping up my training, I've noticed many times where I've been struggling with heartburn and acid reflux type sensations. I tried a Vega Sport drink or Vega Sport recovery drink, which I thought maybe my gut just couldn't handle, but the heartburn has kind of stuck around for a little while now that I stopped using that specific drink. Forgive me. I'm obviously going to bring this up with my doctor, but just wanted to bring the question to you guys and see if there's anything obvious I'm missing. Am I pushing myself too hard? Is my body just reacting to the new workload? Will this go away? Should I consider specific nutritional tactics? Thanks again, and he says, I really do see you guys as my own personal coaches, so excited to hear your feedback.
Nice.
That's pretty cool. Thanks, Maddie. Appreciate that. So we've got, Chad's got a lot of information on acid reflux in general, and we'll go into that.
Yeah.
But also, this isn't the first time that I've heard this for sure. We've had questions submitted where I've seen people discuss this.
I dealt with this, so get to that on a pretty regular basis.
Cool. Awesome.
Lots of people have acid reflux. Lots of people do endurance training.
Yeah.
They overlap.
Yeah, and sometimes though, we'll see what Chad says, but there's always false. It's like correlated, not causation. Yeah. Like it just happens at the same time. I wear pink socks when my team wins. Yeah. Therefore,
pink socks win. Yeah. Cool. So Chad,
okay, so
dig in.
I do have quite a bit of information on this. I'll try to get through it rather quickly, but I think it's all germane.
At your own pace, Chad.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so let me start off by quickly listing the basic anatomical structures that are involved with the possible disorder that you're describing here, Maddie. So you have your esophagus, which is crudely the tube that links your throat to your stomach, obviously your stomach, and of course their connection. It's something called the lower esophageal sphincter. Probably just call it LES from this point forward. Mm-hmm. The issue of heartburn revolves around these three parts of the digestive tract, and are simply due to the way acid or possibly even acid-coated contents of the stomach can back up from the stomach into the esophagus and lead to various levels of discomfort and potentially much bigger issues. So let me also briefly differentiate between three terms that get used synonymously but don't necessarily describe the same thing. First is acid reflux, which is the occasional version of what I just described, that whole backing up into the esophagus. Mm-hmm. The second one is Gerd, G-E-R-D, and it's an acronym for gastroesophageal reflux disease. So gastro meaning stomach, esophageal, I'm sure you can put that one together. The reflux that I just described, and disease because this is the chronic, more severe form of acid reflux. And then heartburn is just a symptom of either. So it's not its own thing, it's a symptom of either of those two things.
Got it.
So we're really talking about 2 degrees of the same disorder, and heartburn itself is just a shared symptom.
Okay.
Clear on that?
Hot dogs. Whenever I think of like heartburn, I think of like hot dog stands in New York City.
Well, that's a likely cause. So most people have experienced heartburn. For those who haven't, it presents as a burning sensation, basically starting in your sternum up to your throat, basically. And again, it's caused by that stomach acid coming back into contact with the more sensitive tissues of the esophagus, which is far less acid resilient than the stomach. It's usually accompanied by a sour or bitter taste in the mouth, very common and really easily addressed using over-the-counter antacids, but this assumes that the frequency isn't a concern, and I'm going to elaborate on that in a bit. So heartburn is just a symptom of reflux, whether it's infrequent or chronic. And now let's move on to a little bit more information on each of those digestive disorders.
Cool.
So with acid reflux, the lower esophageal sphincter, that LES I just talked about, is weakened. It doesn't tighten properly. And this could be due to something like a hiatal hernia, but far more commonly it's dietary or drug-related. Foods like chocolate, coffee, tea, tomatoes, tomato products, to name a few. Drugs like antihistamines, calcium channel blockers, analgesics or pain relievers, sedatives, antidepressants. Some of these I'm going to elaborate on in a bit because they may be relevant. But whatever weakens or relaxes this sphincter, the results are that stomach acid makes its way back up into the esophagus. Okay, so GERD, on the other hand, the gastroesophageal reflux disease, is again the chronic or recurring form of acid reflux, where the diagnosis threshold is set at 2 times per week. 2 times per week. So over 2 times per week, and chances are you're afflicted with GERD. But it's really any frequency that leads to a persistent inflammation of the esophagus. Okay. So obviously something that's going to have to be determined by a physician, which over the long term can lead to bleeding, ulcers, scarring, sometimes even cancer, esophageal specifically. Its symptoms are definitely past the point of heartburn, but of course heartburn's included. They are things like bad breath, damaged tooth enamel, degrees of regurgitation. You can get a bit of a literal hot mess back in your mouth. I'm sure we've all experienced this at some point in time. Mm-hmm. Chest pain, persistent dry cough, asthma, trouble swallowing, some of the symptoms. So if those resonate with you, consider what might be going on. So to review, we're really talking about the difference between occasional acid reflux and more frequent bouts of reflux, which might point to GERD. That being the case, this is where a physician probably ought to enter your picture.
Got it. Okay.
And for what it's worth, I feel like I can speak on this topic with a bit of authority because back in my early 20s, I worked early mornings at UPS, and I dealt with what I thought was heartburn, was diagnosed as GERD, GERD. And it does make me wonder what sleep's impact might have been on it because those were early mornings. I was on Prilosec here and there. Eventually, the symptoms just abated. I don't really know why, but probably due to the changes that I made in my diet because it was very clear what I could and could not tolerate, both in forms of food and liquid. It was extremely painful, but it went away. These days, I still deal with heartburn, but from time to time. And in all likelihood, I have what's called peptic esophageal stricture. We just recently figured this out, which is the narrowing of the portion of my esophagus. Makes swallowing really difficult sometimes. And it's probably related to what I dealt with in my 20s, maybe not. And then, of course, when it comes to the occasional heartburn, I'm very aware of what brings it on. I mean, I know what I'm getting myself into it. It's easy to recognize.
So I have a question.
Shoot.
Were you guys gentle with the packages at UPS?
Very. Said when we got a little upset.
Yeah. Did you play football or rugby with the package?
I knew it.
No comment.
Never, Chad.
No comment. No, I don't want to disparage the current UPS folk. Okay, so on that note, let's talk about possible causes. So, as I mentioned earlier, several drugs can cause different degrees of acid reflux. Amongst them are Nsaids, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. I think ibuprofen, most commonly used. So, drugs like brand names like Advil, Motrin.
So, can I jump in a couple times?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Maddie, you're raising up your endurance. A lot of people go, I'm sore. Take an ibuprofen. You'd be taking a lot of that. That could be could be one.
Basically, everything I'm going to list right here, I think, is absolutely something he could
endurance
potentially
athletes could be doing.
using. Endurance athletes and just people, but yeah.
And in general, ibuprofen is not recommended for endurance athletes because it blunts adaptions. So don't do it.
Okay, so back to ibuprofen. These can irritate the stomach and esophagus linings, and long-term can lead to bleeding and ulcers. So overuse has consequences. Aspirin can also cause heartburn. So unless you're taking it for heart health reasons, maybe consider using Tylenol or another brand of acetaminophen as your go-to pain reliever if you think heartburn is an issue. Osteoporosis medications. If you're on them, you know the names better than I do. Iron supplements. And while, yes, supplementing iron can help red blood cell production, can help us better transport oxygen to our working muscles, can improve energy levels, immune function, combat iron deficiency anemia, which is the topic that we're going to cover in next podcast deep dive.
Cool.
It can also cause heartburn. So the advice for avoiding heartburn in this context is typically to take iron supplements with food and avoid taking them before bed.
Vitamin C kind of foods. That's good. It helps absorption
of iron. Yeah. Yep. And then high blood pressure medications. So I mentioned calcium channel blockers earlier, also beta blockers. There are many forms of high blood pressure medications to choose from. So ask your doctor for an alternative blood pressure medication if you suspect that your medication is causing heartburn or acid reflux. Anti-anxiety drugs. Again, ask your doctor for alternative medications if you think that's the cause. Tricyclic antidepressants, and this is just a specific class of antidepressants. So if you're on this class of antidepressants, ask your doctor for another class of antidepressants. Antibiotics, tetracycline is one I saw named specifically. I'm sure there are others. Alcohol consumption, which, I mean, is it really hard to imagine that a literal poison might be causing a bit of GI distress?
Strange, huh?
So I feel like I didn't need to
I like
list that one.
when he says it, he smiles.
Yeah.
He just can't help but think
I'm
of
just
it.
saying, you know that I've suffered from this, and I mean, it's like I said, it's not too hard to connect the dots.
Right.
Other possible causes. So I'll run through these pretty quickly. Obesity, due supposedly to extra pressure on the abdomen. Smoking, which is tied to basically everything that's bad for a body. Pregnancy, which is attributed to the elevation of progesterone, which can cause the esophageal muscles to relax, and I assume this includes that LES.
Hey, yeah, actually, I mean, I've never been pregnant, but yeah, my
Sarah,
wife,
perhaps?
yeah, when I remember she had never suffered with it, and then
until
once
pregnancy. Well, goodish news on that front is that it typically ends with childbirth.
And
so
it did.
Pressure goes, okay, wow, ding, ding, ding. And then even late night meals, lying down after eating, and of particular relevance to us, eating too close to a workout. All these things can facilitate the reflux. So what are some of the recommended treatments? Obviously, lose weight, quit smoking, dietary modifications like reducing fatty food intake. Supposedly due to longer digestion times, there's a relaxation of the LES. I couldn't quite put that together, but it's there. So I didn't dig into that too much. Avoiding spicy or acidic foods, pretty obvious. And peppermint, oddly. Turns out peppermint actually relaxes that lower esophageal sphincter also.
Interesting.
So, why?
I like how he didn't mention alcohol.
No.
It's coming.
Up next, reducing alcohol, after which I put duh.
Just for his own self.
It's in there. It's in my notes. Eating smaller meals, remaining upright for a few hours after eating. Even going so far as to avoid tight-fitting clothing because that can create additional abdominal pressure.
There we go. Nate's funny over here.
Okay, so, and then of course you can medicate, and I'm just going to touch on the 3 big hitters, the most suggested medications, 1 over the counter, 2 prescribed. So antacids are effectively the Band-Aid or the quick fix.
Is that like Tums, something like
chewy.
that?
Yeah, exactly that. Neutralize stomach acid, but they do have a record for inhibiting both protein and other nutrient uptake. So specifically, I think maybe I get to that later. But anyway, they often contain calcium, which can also inhibit iron absorption. Again, the topic for my next deep dive. And excess calcium can lead to kidney stones, affect heart and brain function. No
So
big
don't
deal.
eat them every day.
Yeah.
If
Well, that's
your plan is to eat them after every meal, that's probably not the best plan.
And exactly right. So these are just a handful of the reasons why frequent use or usage in high quantities, because some people just pop these like M&Ms.
Yeah.
Why over-reliance on over-the-counter antacids should be avoided. So over-reliance, over being the key term there. But in frequent use, accompanied by a pretty rapid elimination of heartburn, probably okay. If that's not the case, though, it might be time to see a physician who's likely to prescribe one of 2 things. The first is called H2 blockers. Nerd name is histamine H2 receptor antagonists, because in this case, histamine stimulates the acid-making cells. And these H2 blockers inhibit this acid-making process.
Okay.
So put simply, they're designed to reduce the production of stomach acid, so nipping the issue in the bud, and also reduce the incidence of stomach ulcers. So drugs like Tagamet, Zantac, and Pepcid.
Oh, okay. I've heard of those.
All right.
Yeah.
And according to one drug manufacturer, they do all this with little to no side effects. But if you consult the Google, it says, while considered rare, you'll find constipation, diarrhea, difficulty sleeping, dry mouth, dry skin, headaches, tinnitus, runny nose, to name a few. There's always a laundry list.
Chad's got a secondary career in reading off those side effects at the end of the commercials. That was good.
Yep. Yeah. And then finally, if you aren't prescribed H2 blockers, you're likely going to be introduced to PPIs. These are proton pump inhibitors, and they basically block production of acid by blocking the gastric proton pump. Even nerdier, they block the hydrogen potassium ATPase enzyme, both of which are the final step in acid production.
Okay.
So they're longer acting than H2 blockers, and they reportedly stop all stomach acid production. This can have some desirable and less than desirable consequences. But this does make them especially useful in allowing damaged linings to heal. So if you actually have damage to your esophageal or stomach lining, maybe PPIs are a good way to go. So what about the risks of PPIs? Vice.com, always helpful and entertaining, looked at a number of studies found in the BMJ, British Medical Journal, and the risks associated with PPIs, this cracking me up, range from decreased nutrient absorption, specifically B12 and magnesium, which for athletes, I mean for anybody is a concern, to a general increase in chance of death. Much like driving a car. So also
strange.
Included a bit more specific ones, heightened risk of dementia, osteoporotic bone fractures, heart attack, chronic kidney disease, stomach cancer. So if you're considering a PPI, do your homework.
Yeah.
Oh, and withdrawals from PPIs, should you go this route and then ever choose to quit them, are reportedly brutal due to what's called the acid rebound effect. So you tell your body you want acid, then you tell you don't want acid, or you tell your body you don't want acid, then you tell your body you do want acid, and it kind of makes up for lost time.
It gets to work.
Yeah, there's a brutal period that you have to get through where there's an overproduction of stomach acid. To get back on track.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah. So
Not so bad.
So again, I just want to make it clear. It's your responsibility to do your homework. You can't just rely on your physician and expect your physician to know everything about you and to do, have all the proper answers to all these considerations that you can make before time.
I think everything you mentioned, just if you take any of those, go to your doctor and here are all the things.
Yeah.
Some other I've also had experience with this. So one symptom is after you eat, if you get hiccups, that's like acid reflux.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, I always get hiccups after I eat spicy
Brutal
food.
hiccups in some cases.
Yeah, and I know my wife, and I'm like, it's just acid reflux. I'm sorry. And then the other one is this can like scare you. It feels like a flutter in your chest.
Palpitations.
Yeah, and it feels like you're having a heart attack because it's like it feels like your heart's actually
Dumping
beating
out of your chest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've had it where it's enough of it where it's like damaged. So I've taken Prilosec, which is great. It's like a 14-day or something treatment. Take that every day. It takes a while, and then it's healed again. And then when the acid comes back, you don't feel it. So it's no big deal. I think I've done that twice in my life when it got bad. The other thing, it's kind of funny. I had one vacation. I don't know if you guys remember. This was a while back. I was going to Mexico with my family. I threw away my kids' passports the day before. Like actually, we showed up at the airport. Yep. So we flew to Phoenix, drove to Tucson, got same day passports, pushed our flights, went overnight. I got food poisoning at Panera. Threw up all night. Was in the ER really bad. And the doctor's like, okay, what you can't do for the next week is drink alcohol, have fatty foods, or spicy foods, or coffee.
And you were in Mexico.
Yeah, we're going to Mexico. Like, what's a food in Mexico? It's not fatty, alcohol. Spicy, or coffee.
So you drank a lot of water.
No, I did. I don't know if I did Prilosec, but I had some Tums, and I think I was starting Prilosec, and no, actually I had food poisoning, so it didn't matter for that. But just the same kind of idea of you don't want to upset your stomach.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm going to close with, basically. So to wrap this up and to tie it into acid reflux during workouts or even races, the symptoms, namely heartburn, pretty easy to tie to dietary causes. So at least when it happens infrequently or randomly, not chronically. If it happens chronically, you probably got to think a little outside of that box. In these cases, I typically just pop a couple of Tums, either prior to the workout or on the fly. Almost always does the trick. But I also pay attention to the frequency of this. If I'm over-relying on it, I definitely become concerned. But if you pay attention to your diet and note what you think might be triggering the reflux, you're probably not far off base. And it's also worth mentioning that I've had really encouraging results with apple cider vinegar, which oddly, they say a couple tablespoons in water prior to a meal, and there are a number of reasons for doing this. Health and endurance-related benefits like increased insulin sensitivity, which means increased glycogen uptake, et cetera. But this is counter to what we might think because it introduces more acid, in particular acetic acid, into the stomach. And in some cases, reflux is caused by an underproduction of acid. I can't even make sense of that. But I do it anyway, and not for these reasons. And since I've started using apple cider vinegar, just a couple spritz on my salad with a Cole & Mason spritzer, a little pump, which is about the only way you can get vinegar on a salad without not completely polluting it. I haven't had an acid reflux or heartburn flare-up since then. Again, correlation. I'm not trying to say this has fixed the issue, but there are reasons to eat apple cider vinegar anyway, and if it could positively influence your occurrence of heartburn, then why not?
Interesting.
I used to take shots at it every day because I read it's going to prevent I was
going to mention that.
Prevent food poisoning because I used to get food poisoning like twice a year.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Yeah, for gut flora in that case, right? So,
yeah. But if you think of it, if you do this, like think of the worst tequila you've ever had.
Oh my God.
Multiply it twice.
No, that's in my notes too. Just to elaborate on how horrible it tastes.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's one of the hardest things you can get down. And even mixing it, diluting it in water, that just prolongs the agony.
Yeah.
So I tried the shot. That came right back up.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much science behind it. It's more like they've been doing it since Roman times. But
there is no science on it. By the way, I think I found a 2015 graduate study paper, his thesis. That's the only thing I got. Yeah,
so I don't do it anymore. But if you do that, make sure you rinse your mouth because it can eat your teeth. Yep. So that's all I wanted to mention is if you do it, make sure you rinse your teeth.
Correct.
Interesting. So that should, Maddie,
that's all I got.
You got lots of info on there, anecdotes.
But so in general,
we would need.
It shouldn't be just training in general,
right?
That we know.
Really unlikely. I couldn't find anything that linked specifically training and training intensity to increase gastric acid.
I would say for Maddie, it would be the connection. Most likely, the connection in what you eat, and then look for that either the throw up in your mouth. That's easy to tell. But the little pain or hiccups. I think hiccups are like the first sign you don't really correlate them to see what foods you're doing, and then also the kind of drugs. drugs could be it.
Yeah,
a lot of people take a lot of drugs.
Yep, they do.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.
If you think I have better hair than Jonathan, give it a thumbs up. If not, leave a comment.
My hair is better than his.